Hello and welcome back to Dr. Deep State. I'm going to begin a soft close for the course. So I'm going to be tidying up from last time and then introduce the conclusion to the course, Esoteric Biopolitics and the New World Order. So what we talked about over the last series was the pornification of Western culture. And we traced much of this back to a tradition within Kabbalistic Talmudic Judaism, and especially the Sabbatean strain that was part of this larger Venetian oligarchical history and structure and their operation. And the conclusion that we found was pretty shocking when you think about it, that the goal was to bring about a Messiah. And it's probably hard for some people to get their heads around that, especially if we tend to have a materialistic or naturalistic outlook upon the world. But if you let yourself go there for a moment and we think about the manufacturing of prophecy, especially the prophecies of Isaiah, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah, with an emphasis Ezekiel 38 and 39, that we see very much that is what's going on in the world today. People have, in order for the Messiah to come, been systematically over the last several centuries degraded in order to bring about a world where everybody is complicit in this evil enterprise. And I'm going to elaborate on that a bit. But when we see the events going on the ground today, whether in Syria or Iran, it's mind-boggling to think that people are literally manufacturing biblical and Talmudic prophecy to bring around this apocalyptic depopulation of the world. And so within the Talmud, it's rather shocking when it goes into its concepts of population control in relationship to the new Messiah. This is where I want to go with this right now. I am going to use something I pulled from Henry Mako this week, and he's going to give us, we explain the first level of the chessboard and the second level when we're waking up to that in fact there is a new world order, that its last iteration probably begins with Francis Bacon in the Elizabethan era, and that it's being rolled out and its pace is increasing each day. And I want to use some of his words to describe what we talked about in the video called the Magick Bullet Theory. And I said, what happens to the mind, the soul, and our being collectively and individually when we see these disparate ideas, and we know that to truly look at the truth will socially disable us. And we're put in that predicament all the time. And I called it a method of Kabbalistic control. So I want to read a little bit from Henry Mako this week. He begins, "They want your soul. That's why they're so sloppy. Anyone can see that no planes hit the Pentagon or crashed at Shanksville. They want us to compromise ourselves by accepting these lies and not seeking justice for the victims. Thus, by our passivity and cowardice, morally, we become their accomplices, practically collaborators." And one of his commenters weighed in, "How can anybody fall for this hoax?" I think he's referring to the latest phase of PSYOPs that we've been seeing. Is the US a nation of rubes? It requires the suspension of reason because it isn't believable to a reasoning and rational human being. That's assuming anybody bothered to hit a click button and investigate any of this. One has to participate. And this is what biopolitics is about. And this is where it comes into play in explaining what's going on in the world today. One has to participate in their own deception in order to believe it. Again, a grand initiation, a grand Kabbalistic initiation. I think that may be what they want. And again, what we've stressed throughout here is I'm making the connection between oligarchy, the true mode of control in the world, and their mode of operation is biopolitics, and making that connection so we can see that real politics today is not about some fictitious left or right paradigm, but it's control over bodies, biopolitical control over human bodies. And then once we know that, we can think about if we choose to comply with that or we choose to resist that control. By conjuring up these events that are unbelievable to a rational and reasoning person, they force us to participate in the lie and our own destruction. The hardest thing in the world right now is staying true to yourself and not deceiving yourself. And this is why I am doing this, Dr. Deep State. That's the way I see it. They need us to be active and lifelong participants in this massive lie. If we can continually suspend our reason and deceive ourselves, we control and police ourselves for them. That's biopolitics. That's why I bring Foucault and Italian and French, etc., thinkers into the equation. We internalize it. We become our own police for them. They enroll us into their project. We are our own slaves. The hardest thing right now is just staying conscious to this all and remain sane. It would be so easy to just let go and allow the currents of change, and this would carry the mind and soul away. Mako continues. They don't want your children, your spouse, your property. That's all the second level of the chessboard stuff. They want the third level. They want your soul. They tell us about the conspiracy because they want us to be compromised. Just as lower ranked Freemasons or ordinary Jews or Americans or Europeans are compromised by their support for the war or their unwillingness to examine it in any meaningful way. They want us all to become demons. They are deliberately clumsy because they want our complicity. They don't want us to say, gee, we didn't know. They have a wager with God. They can win us over to Lucifer, but they have to give us free will, the ability to make a choice. And again, that's why I'm doing Dr. Deep State, because if you have free will, it's helpful to have all of the information available. And thus, why it's helpful for us to look at oligarchy and their mode of operation, biopolitics, and the bigger project at hand. They have a wager with God, as we said. That's the reason they reveal the conspiracy to us. For example, the Rockefellers sponsored the John Birch Society, and that came on the heels of Carol Quigley's expose and mid-century, and they could reveal all this. Two things they didn't want you to do was to look at the esoteric worldview of the bankers. Number one, they weren't supposed to do that, and number two, they would consistently and always conflate free enterprise with capitalism, which I've argued are not the same thing. Capitalism is necessarily monopolistic capitalism. It is a mode of oligarchical organization. Free enterprise, beautiful. Okay, their publication, The New American, still is one of the best sources of information on this conspiracy. But it's controlled opposition. They're able to steer the blame and make sure no real resistance ever develops. Or as Lenin would say, the best way to control the opposition is to be the opposite. So this is why I want to put on the table the spiritual dimensions of what's at stake in terms of events rolling out in the world today, for those that have ears to hear. Just wanted to put it out on the table within the parameters of what could be a political science course if the university system would allow such a course.